The cup was already at his lips. For a split second, the world stood still. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, leader of Burkina Faso, sat calmly at a small table beneath the heavy shade of a mango tree. Around him, senior officers chatted easily. Nothing in the air suggested danger. No sirens, no shouting, just a gentle breeze and the scent of warm dust. The scene could have been lifted from any peaceful afternoon gathering. But that cup, that one cup. His fingers hovered, barely brushing the ceramic. It looked no different from the others. Plain, white, filled with steaming mint tea. But inside, a colorless drop of VXT42, a poison so deadly, so precise, that once swallowed, it would kill within 5 minutes. No pain, no struggle, just quiet, irreversible death. And the man who had delivered it, his own bodyguard. He stood a few feet away, eyes lowered, heart hammering like a war drum. He had been chosen for this mission weeks ago, promised freedom, promised wealth. The money had already been transferred to a hidden bank account, half now, half later. Enough to change his life forever. All he had to do was serve tea. Captain Traoré looked up, his eyes sharp and steady, locked onto the bodyguard's face. Just a second too long. Long enough to say, "I see you." And then he smiled. That smile, it wasn't one you could fake. Not the forced grin of a politician, but the calm, knowing smile of a man who had seen too much, survived too much. It sliced through the tension like a blade. He lowered the cup, didn't drink. Across the circle, Colonel Konate, sharp suit, sharper tongue, flicked his gaze toward the captain. "Please, sir," he said, his voice smooth, almost too casual. "The tea is fresh." Still, the cup stayed on the table. And that's when everything began to unravel. Weeks before that moment, everything had felt normal. Or at least what passed for normal in the life of a soldier in Burkina Faso. Captain Traoré had been leading with iron resolve through a country weighed down by insurgencies and betrayal. He wasn't just a military man, he was the symbol of a rising people. Young, strategic, respected across the region. But the higher he rose, the more enemies circled. Some were obvious. Foreign interests unsettled by his policies, corrupt elites ousted by his reforms. But others moved in silence, cloaked in uniform and loyalty. And among them, a plan was born. Poison, not a bullet, not a bomb, just one drop in a teacup. They found the perfect tool, a young bodyguard, trusted, overlooked, quiet, a man used to blending in with shadows. He had a sick mother, a sister in school. He was paid in whispers and wire transfers, the kind that didn't leave traces. The first meeting happened in an alley behind a repair shop. A voice from a tinted car window told him what to do. Just hand him the cup, that's it. He was told it would be painless, clean, a national tragedy, yes, but it would be spun as an accident. Food poisoning, a weak heart. The public would grieve, the power would shift, and the puppet masters would take control. What he didn't expect was the captain's eyes. Because that day, under the mango tree, Ibrahim Traoré didn't just see a soldier offering tea. He saw the shake in his hand. He saw the twitch in his eye. And most of all, he saw fear. So he didn't drink. Instead, he began to speak. Not about war, not about politics, but about small things. About how trust is tested in silence. About how betrayal often wears the face of a friend. The officers laughed nervously. Then he said something that made the blood drain from every face around him. "Do you trust the man who poured your tea?" Colonel Konate stiffened. "Sir," he asked. Captain Traoré turned to his aide. "Drink from my cup." That was when the bodyguard almost collapsed. "No, wait," Konate said, too quickly, too loud. In the blink of an eye, soldiers moved. Arms grabbed. A pouch was torn from the young man's sock. Inside, a tiny red vial, the XT42, enough to kill 10 men. The gathering erupted, not in noise, but in motion. Quiet, controlled chaos. Konate stood frozen, the line draining from his body like sweat. Traoré didn't shout, didn't accuse. He simply said, "Take them in." No noise. It wasn't about arrests. It was about messages. That night, in a cold interrogation room buried beneath the Capitol, the young bodyguard sat with his wrists bound. He confessed everything. The meetings, the money, the code name of the man behind it all. Legal, he said. They called him the Jackal. Captain Traoré watched through a one-way mirror, arms crossed. "We've heard that name before," one of his aides whispered. "Yes," another said. "Intercepted in a foreign intel call last month. He's here, somewhere in the city." The president's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was an operation, carefully planned, executed with military precision, and it hadn't ended. It had only just begun. It was just past midnight when Captain Ibrahim Traoré descended into the underground war room. No flashing cameras, no parade of generals, just 4 men, his closest intelligence officers, and 1 woman, a cyber specialist with a quiet voice and fingers that moved faster than thought. They had gathered around a single black notebook, the one pulled from the bodyguard's bag. It was thin, the kind most people would toss into a drawer and forget. But inside, it was war on paper. Numbers, names, payment codes, meeting places, and 1 word repeated again and again. Lakel. The jackal, Traoré murmured, running his thumb across the edge of the notebook. He's not just a middleman, he's the architect. The cyber expert, her name was Amira, nodded. We've been trying to trace the accounts. They're layered through 5 countries, but there's 1 burner phone message we pulled that hasn't been fully scrubbed. She turned the laptop around. A single message lit the screen. Lattes for the cup. Tomorrow he will see nothing. The coordinates showed the origin point, less than 2 kilometers from the French consulate. That wasn't coincidence. That was calculation. Someone wanted distance, but not too much. Someone was confident. He's still in the city, Traoré said, jaw tightening. We're not chasing shadows anymore. We're chasing a man. But who was Lakel? Amira didn't look up. He's smart. No fingerprints, no digital trail, but we've picked up pieces from multiple countries. Kenya, Mali, even Libya. Same MO, silent kills, political shifts. And what about Konate? Traoré asked. He cracked, said Zongo, one of the intel officers. He's blaming everyone but himself. He says he never met the bodyguard before, but the money trail connects them. We've frozen his accounts. The president exhaled slowly. This wasn't his idea. He was just the willing hand. And Lakel? Zongo asked. Traoré's voice dropped. He was the mind. By dawn, a target location was identified. Apartment 3B, a luxury high-rise in the Wagadougou 2000 district. No cameras in the halls. No guest logs. The kind of place that cleaned too well. The kind of place a ghost would stay. We're not going in loud, Traoré said. We're not making headlines. We smoke him out. He turned to Amira. Track every signal. Every click. If he so much as opens a fridge, I want to know. The next 36 hours were a blur of observation. Agents posted at entrances. Drones hovered 2 streets over. Fake delivery boys rotated shifts. Still nothing. No visual. No confirmation. It was like watching a locked vault that never opened. Until it did. Day 3. A man walked out of the building just before dusk. No one important. A waiter, at least that's what he looked like. But Zongo spotted something odd. The walk, he said. What about it? Amira asked. It matches. Same pattern from the embassy security tapes in Mali. The jackal wore a waiter's jacket that day too. They followed. He didn't go to a restaurant. He didn't meet anyone. He just walked, changed direction twice, stopped to buy a paper, but never read it. Classic counter-surveillance moves. That confirmed it. This was Lakel. And yet, he didn't run. He didn't vanish. He was circling something. Or someone. The trap was sprung that same evening. The presidential office quietly leaked news of a private dinner. Invite only high-level, unlisted. The bait wasn't subtle. It was bold, deliberate. Traoré sat at the head of a long table, draped not in gold, but in his usual cotton tunic. The room was candlelit quiet. No guards inside, just a few trusted guests. 2 plates empty. Then the door opened. He walked in, tray in hand. Calm, expression unreadable. The waiter, the jackal. He moved like he belonged, like he had done it 100 times. But one hand twitched, just slightly, as he poured tea. That was all Traoré needed. Would you like to share a drink with your president? He asked, staring him in the eyes. The man froze. Traoré stood. You've been running for a long time, Alexander. The room didn't move. Even the candles seemed to hold their breath. And just like that, the jackal understood. The game had changed. It wasn't about poison anymore. It was about presence, about being seen, about being caught. He could have run, could have tried, but he didn't. Because even a jackal must know when he's been outplayed by the lion. The jackal said nothing. He simply set the tray down, straightened his jacket, and stared at the man who had hunted him not with brute force, but with patience and precision. Captain Ibrahim Traoré didn't blink. Why, he asked, his voice low, steady. Not just why you accepted the job, but But why now? The room remained silent. The guards at the door didn't move. No one wanted to break the moment. Finally, the jackal spoke. "You are becoming inconvenient," he said. His accent was neutral, his tone cool. "Not to me personally, but to men with influence. Men who prefer their leaders predictable, soft, willing to bend. You weren't bending." Traoré took a slow step forward. "So they offered you what? Money? A promise?" The jackal's lips lifted into the faintest smile. "They offered clarity. I gave them results. Until now." He didn't reach for a weapon, didn't flinch. In his world, silence was a surrender. And this was the end. Traoré nodded once. "Take him," he said. The jackal didn't resist. He was escorted out without handcuffs, without force, just eyes on him everywhere. He knew the power wasn't in the chains. It was in the exposure. The myth of the ghost shattered. Back at the intelligence compound, the interrogation was quiet. No beatings, no screaming, just questions asked in rhythm. The jackal answered most of them. Cold, clinical. He worked across West Africa, hired by financiers, by disgruntled former leaders, even foreign consultants with private interests. He kept no loyalties, only contracts. The bodyguard, Zongo, asked, "Why him?" "Because he had reasons," the jackal replied. "Desperation makes people obedient." And Konase? A tool, ambitious, bitter, easy to manipulate. He thought he was playing chess, but he was only ever a pawn. Amira watched from behind the glass. She had seen monsters before, terrorists, warlords, even coup plotters. But this man was different. No theatrics, no rage, just emptiness. Meanwhile, Traoré stood alone on the palace rooftop. The city below him buzzed quietly. Wagadougou, his capital, bathed in soft orange light as the sun dipped low. For a moment, he wasn't the president. He was just a man who had nearly been killed by someone wearing his colors. A teacup still sat on a nearby table. The same one. He hadn't moved it. He wanted to remember. Not the poison, not the betrayal, but the fact that he hadn't drunk it. That somewhere, deep in his instincts, he had learned to pause, learned to read. The lesson was clear. Betrayal doesn't always shout. Sometimes it smiles. 3 days later, at the military academy, the cadets were told to line up at dawn. No one explained why, just orders. Rigid, fast. Whispers ran down the line. Another coup attempt. Was the president attacked again? Did they catch the jackal? And then he arrived. No convoy, no heavy armor, just a lone figure in a simple tunic, walking across the dusty field with the weight of the nation in his silence. Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood before them, eyes scanning the young faces, soldiers still learning to become leaders. In his hand, that cup. The same plain ceramic, no markings, no gold rim, but held with a respect that made it feel sacred. "This cup," he said, raising it slightly, "almost ended my life." The cadets held their breath. "Not because of what was inside it," he continued, "but because of who handed it to me." He paused. No speechwriters, no script, just his voice. A leader must be ready to die, but he must also be ready to listen, to see, to sense when something is wrong, even in silence. He walked forward, placing the cup gently on a stone pedestal beside the academy flag. "It is no longer a symbol of death," he said. "It is now a symbol of survival, of vigilance, of the price we pay to protect what matters." The courtyard was silent. A few cadets saluted. One whispered under his breath, "I'll never forget this." Neither would the others. Back in the capital, deeper inside the intelligence archives, Amira uncovered something new. An encrypted folder, one the jackal had tried to erase but didn't finish. Inside, names. Not just traitors, but sympathizers, supporters, potential future attackers. At the top of the list, a businessman with deep political ties, living in Atlanta. Traoré leaned over her shoulder, reading the list carefully. "This isn't over," he said. Zongo looked up. "Another plot?" "No," Traoré said, "a network." The list was longer than anyone expected. 47 names. Business leaders, diplomats, ex-military, journalists, even 2 low-level politicians in the Burkina Faso parliament. Some names were familiar, others were shocking. All of them had one thing in common: ties, direct or indirect, to the jackal. And now, with the jackal captured and silent in an underground cell, those names had nowhere to hide. "This isn't just treason," Zongo said, flipping through the pages. "This is a blueprint." Amira nodded. The structure's tight, decentralized. They never used names, just numbers, code phrases, hidden meetups. These people have been moving pieces for years, slowly, quietly. At the center of the new web was the man in Atlanta, a tech magnate turned political fixer. He'd been under radar for years, donating to charities, organizing African economic forums in the US, even advising African startups. Clean image, global influence, but beneath it all, he'd been financing destabilization. Traoré tapped his finger on the name. I want his calls monitored, every transfer traced. If he sneezes, I want to know what kind of tissue he uses. Amira gave a small smile, already on it. But something else bothered Traoré. If the jackal was caught, if the plot had failed, why did the machine still feel like it was running? What if the poisoning had been the beginning, not the climax? 4 days later, a second notebook surfaced. Not from an agent, not from a mission, from a cadet. He had been on duty cleaning Konaté's former office. Hidden in the base of a desk leg was a micro-scroll wrapped in a weathered cloth. Inside, drawings, notes, floor plans. It wasn't just about removing Traoré, it was about replacing him, immediately. The transition plan was written in brutal simplicity. Phase 1, remove. Phase 2, replace. Phase 3, rewrite. They planned to frame the poisoning, Zongo muttered, as a medical condition, a heart failure, no foul play, and then Konaté steps in as interim head, smooth, legal, controlled. But there was one flaw in the plan. Traoré saw through it. And he didn't just survive. He waited, because now he knew the attempt wasn't isolated. It was systemic. That evening, he summoned a private council. Not his full cabinet, just 5 men. Loyal, unshakable. In the room, a map of the capital, a list of the 47 names, and a single goal. Cut off the arms, Traoré said. Not with violence, with silence. What do you mean? Zongo asked. No arrests. Not yet. Just pressure. Eyes. Freeze accounts. Cancel meetings. Cancel flights. Let them feel it. Let them know we know. The operation launched that night. One by one, names on the list found their phones dead. Their bank cards declined. Their guards reassigned. Even the restaurants they frequented quietly removed their reservations. There were no headlines. No public statements. Just whispers. Something was happening. Meanwhile, the jackal waited in the dark. They hadn't interrogated him in days. They didn't need to. His silence said everything. But one night, around 3 a.m., he requested a conversation. Not with a guard, not with a lawyer, with Traoré. The president came alone. No guards, no gun. Just the two of them, separated by a glass wall. You've dismantled the operation, the jackal said, voice flat. No, Traoré replied, I've only started. The jackal leaned forward. You do realize this was never about you. You're not the endgame, you're the test. Traoré didn't flinch, and I passed. The jackal's eyes narrowed. Did you? Or did you just pause the clock? Traoré stood. That's the difference between us. You think in cycles, I think in generations. He turned to leave, but the jackal said one more thing. You'll need to watch your academy. Traoré froze, then walked away. The next morning, a cadet collapsed during a drill. Nothing serious at first, just dehydration they thought, but a blood test revealed something strange. Traces of the same compound found in the tea, VXT42, microdoses. Someone had been testing tolerance levels. Inside the academy, a place thought sacred, Traoré arrived before noon. He didn't shout, didn't demand. He stood in front of the cadets, just like he had before, and said one thing. There will be no more hiding in uniforms. And with that, a full academy inspection began. Rooms, backpacks, lockers, tech. No warning, no mercy. By nightfall, 3 cadets have vanished. One was found boarding a bus to the northern border. Another was hiding in a cleaning supply closet. The third, he walked into the president's office and laid down a bag filled with burner phones and coded messages. I didn't know how far it went, he said, but I want to help stop it. Traoré looked at him, not with pity, not with rage, with respect. Then start talking. The web was bigger than anyone imagined. And it was no longer just about one poisoned cup. It was about loyalty, about legacy, about the soul of a nation. But what none of them knew, what even the jackal hadn't said, is that there was one name missing from the notebook. One name not on any list. The real mastermind. watching from afar, waiting for the next move. 3 weeks after the failed poisoning attempt, Burkina Faso was quieter than it had been in months. But it wasn't peace. It was pressure, the kind that hums in the background. That buzz of uncertainty when the dust hasn't quite settled. The 47 names were being tracked. Some had gone underground. Others pretended nothing had changed, but they all knew the lion was watching. Yet the silence didn't bring comfort, because something still didn't make sense. And Traoré could feel it in his bones. Back in the interrogation room, the jackal sat with his head tilted back against the wall, his breathing slow, measured. He hadn't spoken since the last visit. But then, without warning, he requested a final conversation. Same rules, no guards, no threats, just the two of them. Traoré entered the room, this time sitting directly across from him. "I know there's another name," he said. The jackal smiled faintly. "You're sharp." "Who is it?" Traoré asked. "I was hired through a shell," the jackal replied. "But the real sponsor? The one who wanted you gone, not because of what you've done, but because of what you might do. That man's never in the room, never on the call. You know his name." "Yes, and you've only give it to me." The jackal leaned in slightly. "Only if you answer one question first." Traoré raised an eyebrow. "Go on." The jackal's tone sharpened. "If you knew who it was, if you knew how deep this goes, would you still stand your ground, knowing the fight would never end? That for every jackal you catch, another waits behind a desk with a checkbook and a smile." Traoré didn't hesitate. "I would." That was all the jackal needed. He whispered a name. One Traoré knew. Not a criminal, not a warlord, not even a soldier. A diplomat. Respected, seen on international news. An advisor on African development strategies. A man who had once stood shoulder to shoulder with Traoré at a summit in New York, and behind closed doors. The architect of a quiet war. The betrayal hit different, because it wasn't just a man with power. It was a man who had earned trust, from the people, from allies, from the president himself. The next step required subtlety. Traoré didn't issue an arrest warrant, didn't call a press conference. He sent a message. One teacup, delivered to the diplomat's office in Dakar. No note, no signature, just the same white ceramic placed gently on his desk by a courier who vanished into the crowd before he could be questioned. The message was clear. "I know." Later that week, during a private intelligence debrief, a mirror revealed a new piece of evidence. A video file recovered from the jackal's deleted archive. A backup no one had noticed before. It was a meeting. Fuzzy quality, dim lighting, but the voice was unmistakable. The diplomat, calm, charming, dangerous. "If Traoré stays in power, we lose everything. The contracts, the pipeline deals, the leverage. This isn't personal. It's business. Quiet. Simple. A drop in a cup, and we move forward." The room froze. The file wasn't just damning. It was lethal. With one upload, Traoré could destroy the man's career, expose him to the world, but he didn't. Not yet, because this wasn't just about revenge. This was about strategy. So instead, he gave a televised address. That evening, the people gathered at homes, in courtyards, at small cafes and packed city squares. Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood at the podium, not flanked by generals but surrounded by cadets from the military academy. His voice was calm. "I was nearly killed by a man I trusted, not because of who I am, but because of what I represent. To some, I am a threat, not with weapons, but with the idea that Burkina Faso can stand with our puppets, that we can lead ourselves." The crowd listened in silence. "They sent poison in a cup," he continued, "but they underestimated something greater, our ability to see through the silence, to stay standing even when the attacks come from within." He held up a small object. "That same teacup. This is not a warning. It's a symbol, not of fear, but of fire. Of the fire we carry when we refuse to kneel." Applause erupted. Some chanted, some wept, and the message rippled beyond borders. That night, back on the palace rooftop, Traoré stood alone, watching the skyline. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't celebrating. He was preparing. Because the truth was, another storm would come. It always did. But this time, his people were watching more closely, listening more sharply. And most of all, they understood now that power wasn't in gold or guns. It was in awareness, presence, and resilience. Downstairs, a young cadet walked the halls, pausing by the stone pedestal that held the teacup. He saluted, not because he was told to, but because now he understood what it meant. So what would you have done if someone you trusted handed you a cup meant to end your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let us know how you have handled betrayal in silence. If this story moved you, like, subscribe, and share this with someone who values strength in leadership and truth in chaos. We got more powerful stories coming. Don't miss them.